people notice my silence about my wife, about my marriage, about anything personal, they assume it means something, and they're right. It does mean something, just not what they think. Today I'm going to explain what my silence actually means, not the surface interpretation, the layered truth, because silence is never simple. It's never just one thing. It's protection, revelation, strategy, and pain all at once. And understanding what my silence means requires understanding all of those layers. People think my silence means I'm hiding something, that there's scandal, that the marriage is troubled, that something is wrong. They analyze the absence. They search for clues. They build theories. Never posts about her. Something must be wrong. Never mentions her. They must be distant. She never shows it. She must be unhappy. All of those interpretations miss the point. My silence isn't evidence of a problem. It's a strategy, a deliberate choice not to hide scandal, but to protect something the world doesn't understand. Privacy. In my culture, a wife's privacy is honor. It's not limitation. It's not control. It's respect. Keeping her out of public view, that's not punishment. That's protection. Protection from scrutiny, from judgment, from the pressure I live with daily. So when people interpret my silence as evidence of problems, they're projecting Western values onto a different system. A system where visibility is not empowerment, where privacy is not isolation, where silence is not secrecy, it's dignity. That's the first layer, the cultural explanation. True, but incomplete, because there are deeper layers. The second layer is what my silence protects, not just her, but the marriage itself. If I spoke about my wife publicly, if I posted photos, shared moments, expressed affection, it would create expectations. Expectations I can't meet, because our marriage is not romantic, it's functional, respectful, appropriate, but not passionate. And if I performed passion publicly, it would be a lie that would eventually be exposed by the distance in our eyes, by the formality in our interactions, by the absence of warmth people expect from love. So I stay silent, not to hide the truth, but to avoid having to perform a lie. Silence protects us both from the pressure of pretending, from the exhaustion of performing a relationship that doesn't exist in the way people expect. Silence also protects her from comparison. If I spoke about her, people would compare her to other royal wives, compare her to expectations they've built, compare her to a standard she never agreed to meet. That comparison would be unfair. She didn't choose visibility. She didn't choose to be analyzed. She chose a traditional role, and that role doesn't require public performance. So my silence protects her right to exist without the world's judgment. That's the second layer, protection, also true, but still not complete. The third layer is what my silence reveals, not about problems, but about the nature of the marriage itself. My silence reveals that this marriage is private, not because it's troubled, but because it's transactional. It serves a purpose, stability, continuity, heirs. It serves those purposes effectively, but it doesn't serve emotion, and emotion is what people want to see. They want romance, they want connection, they want evidence that royals are human. But I can't give them that because it doesn't exist, not in this marriage. So my silence reveals the truth without stating it directly, that this marriage is duty, not desire, function, not feeling. And function doesn't require public display, it just requires execution. My silence also reveals distance. If I were close to my wife, if connection existed, if intimacy were present, I would want to share it, not excessively, but naturally, the way people do when something makes them happy. But I don't share, because there's nothing to share, not because things are bad, but because things are neutral, and neutral doesn't inspire expression. It just is. So my silence reveals what I can't say directly, that this marriage exists, that it functions, but that it doesn't fulfill. That's the third layer, revelation through absence. The fourth layer is what my silence says about me, not about her, about me. My silence says I'm guarded, not just about my marriage, about everything personal. I don't share vulnerability. I don't express emotion publicly. I don't let people see inside. That guardedness is strategic, but it's also isolating, because guardedness protects you from judgment, but it also prevents connection. And I've chosen protection over connection every time. My silence also says I'm dutiful. I fulfill expectations. I maintain the image. I protect the institution, even when it costs me personally, even when silence feels like suffocation, even when I want to speak, I don't, because duty requires silence, and I always choose duty. That choice, that consistent, disciplined choice, reveals who I am, not someone who prioritizes personal expression, but someone who prioritizes stability, even at personal cost. My silence also says I'm resigned. I've accepted this marriage for what it is. I'm not fighting it. I'm not resenting it. I'm just living it without enthusiasm, without resistance, just with quiet acceptance. And acceptance doesn't need words. It just needs silence. That's the fourth layer. What silence reveals about who I've become. The fifth layer is what my silence costs, because silence is not free. It has a price. The price is misunderstanding. People assume the worst. They assume scandal. They assume unhappiness. They assume my wife is trapped. None of that is true, but I can't correct it, because correcting it would require speaking, and speaking would create more problems than it solves. So I accept the misunderstanding. I let people believe whatever they want, and I carry the weight of being misunderstood. That weight is heavy, not because I care what strangers think, but because misunderstanding creates distance from the few people who matter, from connection, from being seen accurately. Silence also costs me expression. I can't talk about my life. I can't share struggles. I can't process openly. Everything stays internal, and internal processing without external release, that creates pressure. Pressure that builds, that accumulates, that never fully releases. So I write poetry instead, late at night, when silence becomes unbearable, when I need to express something, anything, without consequences. That's the cost, not visibility, but the inability to be known, to be understood, to share the weight. Silence protects, but it also isolates, and I live with that isolation every single day. The deepest layer, the one beneath all the others, is this: my silence about my wife means I have nothing to say. Not because she's not worth speaking about, but because there's no story to tell, no connection to describe, no emotion to express, no intimacy to share. Our marriage exists, it functions, but it doesn't generate moments worth sharing. It doesn't create memories worth expressing. It doesn't produce feelings worth articulating. It just is, and is. Doesn't require words. My silence also means I'm protecting a different truth. The truth that I loved someone else before her, that I lost that person, that I married appropriately, but not authentically, that my heart is elsewhere. And speaking about my wife would only highlight that absence, would only reveal the distance, would only expose that this marriage is not where my emotions live. So I stay silent, not to hide my wife, but to hide the absence of what a marriage should feel like, the absence of connection, the absence of the love I gave to someone else and never got back. That's the deepest truth. My silence about my wife is actually silence about myself, about what I've lost, about what I can't feel, about the emptiness I carry inside a marriage that exists but doesn't fulfill. The silence will continue, not because I'm cruel, not because I'm hiding scandal, but because silence is the only honest option. Speaking would require lying, performing affection I don't feel, expressing connection that doesn't exist, creating a narrative that isn't true, and I'm not willing to do that, not to her, not to myself, not to the people watching. So I stay silent and I let people interpret that silence however they want. Let them assume problems, let them create theories, let them misunderstand. Because misunderstanding is better than performing a lie. And silence, uncomfortable, isolating silence, is the most honest thing I can offer. Not about her, but about what this marriage actually is. Functional, respectful, distant, and unable to generate the warmth people expect to see. What does my silence about my wife actually mean? It means I'm protecting her privacy. That's the surface. I'm protecting the marriage from expectations we can't meet. That's the strategy. I'm revealing the nature of an arranged marriage. That's the truth. I'm showing who I've become. Guarded, dutiful, resigned. That's the cost. And at the deepest level, my silence means I have nothing to say. Not because she doesn't matter, but because the marriage doesn't generate emotion, doesn't create connection, doesn't produce moments worth sharing. My silence about my wife is actually silence about myself, about what I've lost, about what I can't feel, about the emptiness I carry inside a marriage that functions, but will never fulfill. That's what my silence means, not scandal, just absence, the absence of what should be there, but isn't, and never will be. If you've ever stayed silent because speaking would require lying, you understand. Silence isn't always secrecy. Sometimes it's just the most honest option left when the truth is too painful to perform.